She was 23 years old, and she had nowhere left to sleep. No home she could name, no money in any bank, no living person bound to keep her out of the cold. Just a carpet bag, her father's brass surveyor's compass, and a $1 coin she had carried so long it had worn thin as a wafer. And with that $1, she bought a shut-up land office at the quiet end of a broken boomtown in the Dakota Territory. A squat brick building the whole town had walked past for 25 years without turning a head. The roof had failed. The floor lay under a skin of dust and pigeon feathers. Old men on the mercantile porch laughed into their pipes and said the girl had spent her last dollar on a brick box full of dead paper. But what nobody knew, what not one living soul had known in 25 years, was that behind the iron door of the old records vault, sealed in the dark of that land office, was something that would change her life forever. Before we go on, if stories like this one mean something to you, take a moment and hit subscribe, then tell us down in the comments where you're watching from tonight. We love seeing how far these stories travel. Her name was Philippa Ashcroft, though the 2 or 3 people who ever truly loved her had only ever called her Pippa, and by the time she was 23, there was no one left alive to call her anything at all. She was born in a sodden frame house on the edge of Redwater, a hard little boom town out on the Dakota grass, where the plains ran flat to every horizon, and the whole roaring business of the place was land, claiming it, filing it, fighting over it, losing it. Her father, Josiah, was a surveyor, one of the men who went out with chain and transit and compass and drew the invisible lines that turned open prairie into somebody's 40 acres, and he had a way of standing very still on a rise and reading the lay of a whole country at a glance, seeing the fall of the water and the line of the ridge and the shape of a thing before it was ever drawn. Her mother had gone before Pippa could keep a memory of her. A childbed fever the winter the town was new, the way this country took its women, and so it had always been the 2 of them, father and daughter, in a house that smelled of drafting ink and lamp oil and was poor but never once shut against her. There is a thing that runs in certain children long before they own the word for it, and in Pippa, it ran toward lines, toward boundaries and corners, and the true shape of the ground. The things that everyone else in Redwater fought over blind, and that she alone seemed to see whole. When she was 6, her father set her on his knee at the drafting table and let her hold the dividers, planks, and she walked them across a plat of the township, corner to corner, section to section, and when she was done, she put her small finger down on a strip of ground between 2 filed claims and said, plain as anything, that nobody's line had caught it, that it lay between, unclaimed, a sliver the chainmen had missed. Her father checked it. She was right. A ribbon of good bottomland a rod wide had fallen through the seam between 2 surveys, belonging to no one. He used to tell that story for years. He used to say the good Lord had built his girl to see the true corners of things, the lines other men walked right over, and he had best have had a reason for it. Pippa did not understand him then. She would. Her father died the summer. Pippa turned 19. He was out running a line for the railroad in bad country when a bank of the Redwater gave way under him at high water, and the river took him the way it had taken so many, quick and without any account of itself. Some griefs come slow, a little more of a person leaving with each passing month. This one came in an afternoon, between one reading of the transit and the next, and then the house that had always smelled of ink and lamp oil went suddenly and completely still. Pippa kept his instruments cleaned and boxed, and his field books shelved in order, because those were the things his hands had left in hers, and her hands did not know how to be idle. But she was 19 and alone, and a girl alone in a land-boom town is a thing the town takes it upon itself to dispose of. Her father's business partner, a man named Halloran, who had bought out the surveying practice for a song after the funeral, took her in, not from love, but because it would have looked poorly for a man to profit off a dead partner and then let the partner's girl go onto the road. And Redwater watched such things. She was not wanted in that house, where Halloran's wife counted every plate, and she knew it. And she made herself small and useful and paid her keep in copying field notes and inking fair drafts, and never once let a complaint past her teeth, because complaint, she had learned young, only hands a grudging house the excuse it has been hunting for. And she took what work she could, and the work that felt like her own, the only work that ever had, she found across the street at the land office. The register there was an old man named Thaddeus Boone, who had recorded every claim and patent and quitclaim in that county for 30 years, and had gone half-blind doing it. And he saw, in the quiet, watchful girl who could read a surveyor's chicken-scratch field, notes as easily as print something worth his time, and he took the time with her that no one else in Redwater had. He taught her the true things, not just the copying, which she had from her father, but the whole grammar of land, how a claim is filed and proved and patented, how a title runs back through every hand that ever held the ground, how a boundary is walked and a corner is found and a description is read, meets and bounds, so that words on a yellowed page could be laid down again exactly onto the living earth. He taught her that a title is a chain, every link a person, running back and back to the first foot ever set on the ground, and the whole art of the trade, the whole art of an honest life, he said once, is refusing to let a single link be forged or broken, no matter who leans on you to look away. Land don't lie, he told her once, tapping a plate with one ink-stained finger. Only the papers lie, and only because men make them. She did not know then how far down into her own life those words would run. She would. She saved what little she could. She kept it in a Dr. Lyon's tooth powder tin, a small pasteboard and tin box, gone soft at the seams, hidden behind the loose baseboard in the cold little room Halloran's wife had grudged her. By 22, she had $30 in it. By 23, she had close to 50. And a week after her 23rd birthday, Halloran's wife found the loose baseboard and the tin behind it, and found in that some small offense to rage about that was not about the money at all, but about 4 years of a girl in a house that had never once made room for her, and by dark Pippa stood out on the frozen main street of Redwater, with her carpetbag and her tooth powder tin and her father's brass compass, and the door of the last shelter she had swung shut at her back, and this time the bolt fell and held. She was homeless, in the plain and total meaning of the word, and she did not go looking for a softer one. Old Boone found her there in the blue cold of that evening, and he did not tell her he was sorry, which she was grateful for, because sorry was the one thing all of Redwater kept in endless supply. Instead, he told her about a town 2 days south along the old freight road, a boom town called Vantage that the boom had left behind. The land rush had swept on west when the good ground gave out, and the town had gone quiet, and the land office at the end of its street had been shut and dark for 25 years. He said if she wanted to keep records of her own and read titles true, with no man's leave but her own, that was the place to go do it. She had not planned to go anywhere. But standing in the dark, with all she owned in one bag and $40-odd in a tooth powder tin, she found she had nothing left in Redwater to plan toward. And so, the next morning, she caught the southbound freight wagon out on the last of a week's wages. The road down was long, and it remade the world by slow degrees. Redwater's home grass rolled away behind, and the country opened wider still, the way only the Dakota plains open, until the land was nothing but grass and enormous sky sewn together at a seam so far off it seemed the very edge of creation. Buffalo grass ran silver tan under a wind that never once stopped. Sharp-tailed grouse burst up drumming from the draws. The air smelled of cured grass and dust and coming cold. And, faint off the low dark line of the Badlands to the west, the mineral bite of the buttes where the grass gave out to bare clay. A single marsh hawk quartered the ditches beside the road, tilting low. Pippa watched all of it from the wagon seat with the fierce, memorizing attention she gave to anything she meant to keep, and it seemed to her that the whole country was a thing waiting to be read. Every fall of the ground, every line of the water, every corner a chainman had set and a register had recorded, a great unrolled plat of the world. If a body only knew how to lay her eye along it, she had never crossed this stretch of grass in her life. But some part of her seemed to have always known its shape. The way she had known there was a sliver of ground between the claims before she was old enough to draw the line. Vantage, when she reached it at dusk on the second day, was a town the land rush had made and then abandoned in a single season. One wide main street of false-fronted buildings running down toward a dead corral, better than half of them shuttered in gray, the paint scoured off their faces by 25 years of prairie wind. A church with a silent bell, a shut bank, a dead hotel, a mercantile with two old men still on its porch out of habit. Boone's old friend met her where the wagon let her down, a broad, slow, quiet man named Aldous, who kept the town's one store and a lifetime's knowledge of every deed and boundary and building in that country, and who said little on the walk down the street and let the cold, clean prairie dusk carry the talk for him. At the low end of town, where the buildings gave out against the open grass, he stopped and lifted his chin at a squat brick building standing a little apart from the rest, and he said, "That one. That's the one your Boone wrote me you'd come to see." It was the land office, a low, thick-walled brick building, built the way a records office is always built. Squat and fireproof and stubborn, because a place that holds the only paper proof of who owns what is a place that must not burn and must not be broken into, and good brick does both jobs at once. The roof had failed at the ridge where the sheathing had rotted, and pigeons had got in, and the plank floor beneath the hole lay furred with feathers and droppings and blown dust. But the brick walls, when Pippa laid her hand flat against them, were sound and true, good hard-fired brick laid plumb by a mason who had known his craft. And the segmental arches over the windows had not dropped so much as a hair in 25 years. And at the back of the office, set into the thickest wall, squatted the vault, a small iron-doored strong room, its great door shut fast, the only proof against fire and theft that a boomtown's whole tangled title to itself had ever had. Whoever had raised this office had raised it to outlast the boom that built it, and it had. Whose was it? She asked. Aldous scratched his jaw. Belonged to the last register here, a man named Ezra Crandall. Kept the records near 40 years, all through the rush, when 100 claims a week came through that door, and a man's whole future hung on whether Crandall wrote his name in the book straight. Honest as the ground itself, they said, never once let a rich man jump a poor man's claim by shading a date, which in a boom is a thing that got other registers rich and got a few of them shot. The year the rush moved on and the town went quiet, no wife, no kin anyone ever found. Counties held the place for the taxes ever since. He looked at her sidelong in the failing light. Taxes come to $1, $1. Nobody's wanted it in 25 years. Folks say a room that holds the record of every quarrel and swindle and broken dream in a boomtown is bound to keep some of it. $1, she said. $1, he said. And more work alone than a body ought to shoulder. The next morning she walked to the little county office and laid her single worn-thin dollar coin on the clerk's counter. The clerk, a tired man with a stub of pencil behind his ear, looked at the coin, then at the girl, and asked if she was certain. Land didn't go for $1. $1 was a night's lodging, and a hot supper, which meant one of two things. Either the whole thing was a mistake, or the place was so worthless that in 25 years not one living soul had wanted it. "It's what I've got," Pippa said, "and it's what I want." Something behind the man's tired eyes gave way. He drew up the papers and turned them, and she signed her name in her father's small, exact draftsman's hand, and when it was done, he reached below the counter and set a heavy iron key on the wood between them, black with age and cold as a chain in her palm. "Come with the deed," he said. "Been in that drawer 25 years. It's yours now." And that key, cold and black and heavy in her hand, was the first thing in all the wide world that belonged to Philippa Ashcroft and to no other living person. If you're already caught up in Pippa's story, do us one small kindness and hit that subscribe button. It truly is the thing that keeps stories like this one being told. Shuai walked out to the land office that same afternoon. The iron key cold in her coat, her breath smoking white in the thin prairie air. Up close, the building was both worse and better than it had looked from the street. Worse, because 25 years of weather had come in at the failed ridge and rotted a whole run of the floor to a soft black pulp, and the pigeons had left the place a ruin of feathers and lime. Better, because the brick walls, when she set her palm flat and leaned her weight against them, did not so much as breathe. Good hard brick, plumb and true after 40 years of use and 25 more of standing shut. She walked the whole of it before she said a word, reading the building the way old Boone had taught her to read a title, back through every hand that ever held it. For the sound thing under the sorry-looking one, and under all its ruin, the office was sound to the bone. Whoever had raised it honestly. At the door, she stopped. The old lock was seized with 25 years of rust, and for a long moment, the key would not so much as move. And she thought she had crossed 2 days of grass to buy a door that would never open. She set her shoulder to it and worked the key slow, no forcing, the way Boone had shown her to ease a swelled records drawer back onto its runners. Patience and a little oil and time, and just when she'd near given it up. The wards turned with a deep iron complaint, and the bolt drew back. The heavy door dragged open across the ruined floor, shrieking, 25 years of silence torn open all at once. And the shut-in breath of the place rolled out over her, dust and pigeon and mold and, under it all, the dry ghost-sweet smell of old paper and drafting ink and sealing wax that soaks forever into the walls of any room where the records have been kept for 40 years. She stood in the doorway with the westering sun at her back, throwing her shadow long across the ruined floor. And then she stepped inside. The office ran back before her into shadow, the long counter still standing where the claimants had once lined up to file, the tall record book shelves behind it, the plats still pinned yellowing and curled to the walls. The register's high desk stood by the window, an inkwell dried to a black button in its well, a steel pen laid down beside it, as though the man who used it had only just risen. And at the back, in the thickest wall, the iron vault door shut fast, keeping whatever a dead man had thought worth keeping. It was a wreck, but it was hers, and it was standing, and the bones of it were true. She turned slow in the middle of the dusty floor, and she felt the shape of the life that might be lived here. Settle down over her the way a true line settles onto the ground once the corners are finally found. That first night she slept on the sound end of the floor in her bedroll, a small careful fire going in an old sheet iron stove she'd righted and cleaned, and the prairie outside was loud with sounds she had never heard from a bed of her own. The endless wind combing the grass, a coyote's thin cry far off and another answering, the small settling ticks of an old brick building learning it was no longer alone. She lay awake a long while, and somewhere in the deep of the night, the fear went out of her and something steadier came in behind it, something that felt almost like standing on a rise and reading the true lay of a country at last, knowing, for the first time in years, exactly where she stood. She began the next morning with the vault, because a records vault is the heart of a land office, and she meant to know what her office held. The great iron door was shut and locked, and she had no combination for it, and a good vault keeps its word. She turned the handle anyway, out of stubbornness more than hope, and the handle moved. The heavy bolts drew back with a deep oiled sigh, 25 years asleep, and the door swung slow and ponderous on its hinges. And she understood that old Ezra Crandall, at the very last, on whatever day he had walked out of this office for good, had left his vault unlocked, as though he had meant it to be opened, as though he had left the door on the latch for whoever finally came. She stepped inside with the lantern held up. The vault was small and close and dry as bone, its walls lined with iron shelving, and the shelves were full of the record books of the whole boom, the great leather ledgers of claims and patents and deeds, 40 years of a country's title to itself, ranked and ordered and untouched. It was, she saw with a kind of quiet awe, a complete thing, the entire memory of the land kept whole in the dark while the town above it forgot itself. She ran her lantern along the spines, and there, at the end of the bottom shelf, set apart from the ledgers, sat a row of small iron strongboxes, japanned black, each shut with a little brass hasp, and each one, she saw as she brought the light close, marked on the end with a year. The earliest read was 1859, the last read 1897. The year, Aldous said softly from the vault door behind her, that Ezra Crandall had died and the rush had moved on, near 40 years. One box for every year the old man had kept the records. She lifted the first box down. It was heavy, the dense, deep, unmistakable heaviness of metal that no other weight in the world quite counterfeits. She set it on the iron floor and thumbed back the little brass hasp, stiff with age, and lifted the lid. Gold coins wrapped tight in oilcloth, gone stiff as boards, double eagles on the top, their milled edges still sharp under the dust, half eagles beneath, and under the gold a bed of old silver dollars worn smooth by the hands of long-dead men. She lifted the next box down. More of the same. A third held no coin but paper, banded and tied, old land scrip and territorial notes and greenbacks, folded and pressed flat, the very currency of the boom. Box after box along the iron shelf, one for every year the old man had kept the records and watched 100 fortunes a week come filing through his door, and set a little of his own honest fee down here in the dark of his own vault, instead of trusting it to any of the boom banks that rose and failed and ruined so many. Some years were heavy. The box marked 1878, a peak year of the rush, strained its little hinges. Some were near empty. The box marked 1863, a hard war year, held only a coin or two and a folded plat. Near 40 of them ranked along the iron shelf. Near 40 years of a careful man's careful saving, kept whole in the dark. Pippa sat down on the cold iron floor of the vault with a double eagle bright and cold in her palm, and her throat went tight, and she did not cry, but it was a near thing. Aldous said nothing. There was nothing worth saying over it. They counted the better part of 3 days, and when they were done, and an honest coin man had come down on the freight from the county seat, and weighed the gold on his own balance, and read her fair figures, the whole of it, gold and silver and scrip together, came to a little better than $12,000, more money than Philippa Ashcroft had ever let herself imagine touching in one whole life. But it was not the money that undid her. In the last box, the one marked 1897, beneath the final oilcloth bundle, lay a flat packet, and folded inside it a small bundle of yellowed field notes tied with waxed line, and one sheet folded over on itself, its wax seal cracked with the years, addressed in a fine, exact register's hand, to the one who finds the vault unlocked. Pippa broke what was left of the seal with fingers that would not quite hold steady, and unfolded the sheet, and read it there on the iron floor in the swinging lantern light. "My name is Ezra Crandall," it began. "I was born in the state of Ohio in the year 1830 and came west to a young man with a good hand for figures, a straight eye for a line, and not $1 to bless myself with. I took the register's desk in this office in 1858, when Vantage was new and the whole country was rushing in to claim the ground, and I kept the records near 40 years, and in all that time, I never once wrote a false date in the book to help a rich man jump a poor one's claim, which in a boom is a thing worth more to me than everything in that vault, though I do not look for the world to credit it of a man who died looking poor. Whoever you are, reading this by whatever light, the gold in my vault is not the treasure. It never was. It is only what I could not bring myself to spend, laid by a little each year, and it has done me not one particle of good sealed up in the dark, while I grew old and alone in front of it. I always told myself I was saving it toward something. In 40 years, I never once said what something was. That was the whole of my mistake, and I have had a long, quiet time out here in the emptied town to come to understand it. I spent my life recording where other people made their homes. 40 years I wrote down the corners of other men's ground, the boundaries of other families' lives, and I never once set a corner of my own. I filed 1,000 claims and never staked the one that mattered. Do not do as I did. Do not spend your life keeping the record of everyone else's beginning, and forget to begin. If you have found this, then you came into my office for a reason. Maybe you needed a place to stand in the world, a corner of your own at last. Maybe you were building towards something. Maybe you were only lost, the way I was lost, the way I stayed lost a great deal longer than any soul ought. I was every one of those things once. I left the vault unlocked on purpose, the day I walked out for good, so that whoever came would not have to break it open, but would find it standing open, waiting, the way a door ought to be left for the one who comes after. The money is not the point. It was never anything but the key. What matters is the ground you finally stand on, and that you stake it, and that you make it home. The office is honest and well built, and she will stand another 100 years if you keep the water off her. Some buildings are like that. Some lives could be, if only we would let them. Ezra Crandall, his hand and his last entry in any book. October 1897. Pippa read it twice. Then she folded it carefully and held it in her lap and sat for a long time in the cold quiet of the vault the old man had left unlocked, and she thought about her father standing still on a rise, reading the true lay of a whole country at a glance. She thought about herself at 6 years old, walking the dividers across a plate and putting her finger down on the sliver of ground that lay between the claims, unowned, that everyone else had walked right over. She thought about old Boone tapping a plate and telling her that the land doesn't lie, only the papers, and only because men make them. And she thought about Ezra Crandall, 25 years dead, the honest register, who had recorded the corners of 1,000 other lives and never once staked his own, and who had died old and alone in front of a vault full of gold he never let himself want, and who had, at the last, left the door on the latch for her. And she understood, sitting there on the iron floor, a thing she would carry to the end of her own days, that the gold in the vault was the smallest part of what the old man had left her. He had left her the whole record of the country, and a warning, and a corner of her own to stand on at last. The money was not the treasure. The money was only the key. Months later, the land office was a different building, and Philippa Ashcroft was a different woman. She did the work right, because Boone had taught her that a thing done true once will outlast a thing done fast a dozen over. She used a little of the gold and left the rest banked in the county seat. drawing only what the work called for. She tore off the failed ridge and resheathed it and shingled it against the prairie sky, so the water could never come in there again. She jacked up the rotted run of floor and laid it fresh with clean fur, ripped and planed by hand until it lay flat and true under a booth heel. She rehung the shrieking iron door on new pins. She swept 25 years of pigeon and dust from the record room and dried the great ledgers in the sun, page by careful page, and shelved them, back in order, the whole memory of the country made whole again. She cleaned the register's high desk and set out fresh ink and a new steel pen. And she wound and started the old office clock, and it kept the time. She kept the vault. She left its great door standing open, the way the old man had left it for her, and she never once locked it, because she had come to think a door left open for the one who comes after is a finer thing than any door a body can shut. She kept one empty strongbox, too, the one marked 1858, the year the office was raised, and set it on the register's desk with the old man's letter folded inside, beside her father's brass compass. She did not transform the land office. She restored it. There is a difference. And the difference is the whole of the thing. The people of Vantage came around slowly, the way grass country people do. First they were curious, then they were neighborly, then one morning they had simply decided she belonged, which is the dearest coin such people ever spend and the hardest to earn. Aldous' wife, a small, stout woman named Rasmine, took to carrying a covered dish of lefse and stew down the street every Sunday and would hear nothing of pay. "You eat that, Vesla," she'd say. "You are too thin for these winters." An ancient chainman named Ossian, who'd walked the surveys in the rush, and known Ezra Crandall to nod to, came and sat on the porch bench of an evening and told her the things the old man had told no one. About the young widow over in the next county he had courted by mail for a year and never found the nerve to go and see. About the three-legged office dog named Chandler that had slept under the register's desk a dozen years and lay buried now under the big cottonwood behind the office. Peepa wrote some of it down in a little book. She kept in the box on the desk, building the portrait of a man she had never met out of the scraps that had outlived him. And she opened the office again, not as it had been. The great rush was 25 years dead and would never come roaring back up out of the east, and 100 claims a week would never again come filing through that door. But as a working land office and a title searcher's room, the only one, for 40 miles of quiet, failing towns and half-forgotten claims. Word ran out over the grass and down the section roads that the young woman at the end of Vantage's street could read a title true, back through every hand that ever held the ground, honest as old Crandall himself, and would not shade a date nor bend a boundary for any man's gold. And they came, homesteaders trying to prove a doubtful claim, widows with a tangled title and no man to sort it, sons trying to find the true corners of a father's ground gone to weeds and argument. And Peepa took each one and read the chain back link by link, refusing to let a single one be forged or broken, finding the true corner under all the years of quarrel and drift. The way her father had seen the sliver between the claims, the way old Boone had taught her, the land don't lie. Some of the titles she read were tangled past all hope, and some of the news she gave was hard. She read them true anyhow. An honest register does not know how to do otherwise. And in the spring, she did the one thing Ezra Crandall never had. She walked out onto the quarter section behind the office. Good bottomland that had lain unclaimed since the rush moved on, that everyone had walked right over the way they'd walked over the office itself. And she set her father's compass on a stone, and she found the true corners, and she staked it, and she filed the claim in her own book, in her own hand. A corner of her own at last, the one the old man never let himself stake. She proved it up and built a small house on it beside the office, and she planted a windbreak of cottonwood slips against the endless wind. And she stayed. One evening in the late gold of autumn, she sat on the steps she had rebuilt with her own two hands and watched the light run long and amber across 1,000 miles of grass, and the three-legged dog's great-grandpup dozed on the warm boards beside her. And she thought about all of it, about her father, standing still on a rise, who had read the true lay of a whole country at a glance, and taught her, before the river took him, to see the corners other men walked over. About old Boone, tapping a plat with an ink-stained finger, who had taught her that the land don't lie, only the papers, and only because men make them. About Ezra Crandall, 25 years in the ground, the honest register who had recorded 1,000 beginnings, and never once made his own, and who had learned too late the one corner he never thought to stake, and who had left the vault open at the last for her. There is a pull that runs in some of us, quiet and old, long before we have the words to give it a name. We cannot always say why we want what we want, nor where the wanting means to carry us. But the pull is real, and if you follow it far enough, it tends, in the end, to bring you somewhere. For some, that somewhere is a place they were born to. For others, it is a place they must go out and find. 2 days south along an old freight road, through a shrieking door, into a vault that 25 years of townsfolk swore held nothing but dead paper. A place near everyone else has already given up on. The shape of it does not matter. What matters is whether you can stand inside it, find the true corners, and know at last exactly where you stand. Something in the ground itself that says this. This is the place. This is where I begin. Philippa Ashcroft was 23 years old and homeless, one worn thin dollar coin to her name, and she spent it on a shut-up land office the whole town swore was worthless. It was the best dollar she ever spent, and not, in the end, for the gold in the vault. For the door it opened, left on the latch by a lonely old man, and the corner of ground she finally, in his memory, staked as her own. If this story moved you tonight, subscribe to the channel and share it with someone who needs to hear it. And tell us down in the comments, what's the corner of your own life you've had to find the courage to finally stake and call home? We read everyone, and we would love to hear your story. See you in the next one.